Stunning underwater photos reveal 1845 shipwreck frozen in time. In the frigid waters off King William's Island in northern Canada, the wreck of a ship belonging to the British explorer Sir John Franklin's ill-fated expedition to find the Northwest Passage has been preserved nearly intact for more than 170 years. The HMS Terror, one of two ships that left England with Franklin and 128 crew members in May 1845, was discovered in 2016, but hadn't been systematically explored until now. In early August 2019, members of Canada's Park Service teamed with Inuit researchers to collect photos and video footage of the wreck using a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. According to a statement from Parks Canada, they were able to photograph 90% of the lower deck, including living quarters for the ship's crew and the captain's cabin. The frigid temperature of the water, 0 degrees Celsius or lower, layers of sediment, and lack of natural light appear to have preserved the Terror in amazing detail. Beds and desks were still in place, as well as shelves stocked with plates, glasses, and other dishware. The impression we witnessed when exploring the HMS Terror is of a ship only recently deserted by its crew, seemingly forgotten by the passage of time, Ryan Harris, project director and ROV pilot, said in a statement. Inside the captain's cabin, which was the best preserved of all the lower deck, the team found a wealth of information about the expedition, including a tripod and 2 thermometers, as well as map cabinets with closed doors. According to Parks Canada, there is a high probability that written documents sealed within these areas of the ship will be preserved in a near-perfect state by the unique environment of the wreck. The captain's sleeping quarters, sealed behind another closed door, is the only space on the lower deck the researchers did not manage to explore. With the new images and video footage, they hope to gain a better understanding of existing Inuit and historical accounts of the Franklin expedition, and possibly even trace the stories of the individual crew members. The 59-year-old Franklin was already a celebrated explorer when he set off in search of the Northwest Passage, the fabled northern sea route between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, in 1845. After 2 whaling vessels spotted the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror en route from Greenland to Canada in July 1845, Franklin's ships disappeared, along with all 129 men aboard. In 1859, a note found stashed inside a rock cairn on King William Island provided the only written record of the expedition's sad fate. Dated April 1848, it said that ice had trapped the Erebus and Terror in Victoria Strait in September 1846. The following spring, the crew had abandoned the ships and crossed the ice to Point Victory on King William Island. Franklin died in June 1847, the note recorded, but the surviving 105 officers and crew planned to trek overland to a fur trading post, which was hundreds of miles away. They never made it. In 2014, a research team from the Canadian government finally spotted the wreck of the HMS Erebus in the Victoria Strait near King William Island, resting upright only 35 feet below the surface. 2 years later, the Terror was discovered in a bay about 45 miles away. As reported by National Geographic, archaeologists hope the new images and video of the Terror will help them solve some of the many mysteries surrounding the Franklin expedition, including how the 2 ships ended up so far apart, and why and how they sunk. They also plan to excavate both wrecks further, suggesting more intriguing revelations may be yet to come.
Egypt unveils 4,400-year-old tomb discovered near Giza pyramids. Tomb belonged to a woman named Hetpet and has wall paintings in good condition. A find that authorities hope will revive the country's staggering tourism sector. The tomb is in a wider area of Giza's western necropolis, which is known to be home to tombs from the Old Kingdom from 2686 to 2181 BC. It probably belonged to a woman known as Hetpet, who archaeologists believe was close to ancient Egyptian royals of the 5th dynasty. The tomb, unveiled to the media on Saturday, is made of mud brick and includes wall paintings in good condition that depict Hetpet observing different hunting and fishing scenes. The ministry said the archaeological mission behind the discovery began excavation work last October. Archaeologists have been making discoveries near the site since the 19th century, and Mustafa al-Waziri, who led the mission, believes there is still more to be found. "This is a very promising area. We expect to find more," Mr. al-Waziri said. "We have removed between 250 and 300 cubic meters of layers of earth to find the tomb. What we see above the Earth's surface in Egypt doesn't exceed 40% of what the core holds." Mr. al-Waziri believes Hetpet had another tomb in Giza's western necropolis, and said excavation work is underway to find that one too. Hetpet is a known figure in Egyptian antiquity, although her mummy has not been discovered. Fragments of artifacts belonging to her were found in the same area in 1909, and were moved to a museum in Berlin at the time, Antiquities Minister Khalid al-Anani said. Despite all the discoveries already made about ancient Egypt, experts say they hope to find many more treasures still buried under the vast desert, in part thanks to modern technology. The area of the latest discovery is close to a new museum under construction that will house some of Egypt's most unique and precious artifacts, including many belonging to the famed boy king Tutankhamun. The first phase of Grand Egyptian Museum is expected to be opened later this year, while the grand opening is planned for 2022. In January, Egypt placed the ancient statue of one of its most famous pharaohs, Ramses II, in the museum's atrium, which holds 43 massive statues. Throughout 2017, the Antiquities Ministry made a string of discoveries across Egypt, including some in the southern city Luxor, known for its spectacular temples and tombs spanning different dynasties of ancient Egyptian history. Egypt hopes that the inauguration of the new museum, along with the recent discoveries, will draw visitors back to the country. Drought reveals long-lost Spanish Stonehenge in Extremadura Reservoir. This year's drought may be a nightmare for farmers, but for archaeology buffs, it has an unexpected silver lining. As waters in a reservoir outside Paradela de la Mata in Cascais receded, a circle of megalithic standing stones emerged from the deep. The stones, that date from the 2nd and 3rd millennium BC, form the site of a sun temple on the banks of the river Tagus and were last seen by locals 6 decades ago before the area was flooded during the Franco era to create a reservoir. Excited locals have been making trips out to view the stones that had formed part of a local legend. "We grew up hearing about the legend of the treasure hidden beneath the lake, and now we finally get to view them," Angel Castaño said. "There certainly may have been treasures buried beneath the stones once upon a time, but for now, the treasures are the stones themselves. Now, he is leading a race against time to preserve the site before the rains come." The collection of 144 stones, some of which reach 2 meters high and have engravings of serpents, are arranged in circles, but, like Stonehenge, it's unclear exactly who put them there and for what purpose. The site would have been created over thousands of years using granite transported from kilometers away, explained Castaño, who is part of the Raíces de Paradela Cultural Association fighting to save the stones. Like Stonehenge, they formed a sun temple and barrier ground. They seem to have a religious but also economic purpose, being one of the few points of the river where it was possible to cross, so it was sort of a trading hub. The stones began to emerge from the receding waters earlier this summer and now stand on dry land, for now. "We have had no rain this summer, so the drought, but also a policy of extracting water to send to Portugal, has combined to lower the water table and reveal the stones. But that can all change very quickly." Castiano is leading a group of local residents campaigning to move the stones to a site on dry land. "If we miss this chance, it could be years before they are revealed again," he explained. And the stones, which are granite and therefore porous, are already showing signs of erosion and cracking. So if we don't act now, it could be too late. He hopes that the regional government of Extremadura will step in to move the stones within weeks to a nearby site, that can then put the zone on the tourist map. "There are already lots of reasons to come to this part of Spain, but there is very little tourism," Castiano said. "This could be the kickstart to the region needs to get the tourism into the area." The Romans were the first to value the site, which was then left neglected until Hugo Obermeier, a German priest and archaeologist enthusiast, visited in the 1920s. He excavated the site and took whatever treasures could be moved back to Germany, where they were displayed in a museum in Munich. but the stones themselves were left in situ and disappeared beneath the reservoir when a dam was built in 1963. It isn't a difficult thing to move them. We have the machinery now to do it, said Castellano. Let's just hope there is a political will to save them while we can. Divers off resort town coast uncovered the most important archaeological artifact of the century. The city of Cascais is a vacationer's dream. Located on Portugal's coast and just west of Lisbon, the city boasts casinos, sandy beaches, scenic seaside cliffs, and natural parks filled with brilliant sand dunes. But Cascais is more than just a luxurious travel destination. In 2018, researchers spotted an anomaly in the results of a geophysical survey taken just off the coast. Officials and scholars launched an investigation into the curious spot and uncovered what many have called one of the most important archaeological finds of the last century. During the age of exploration, Portugal expanded its relatively small nation by conquering several territories overseas. With colonies in South America, Africa, and Asia, trade provided the country with spices, foreign artwork, and more. With help from the Portuguese government, researchers at Nova University in Lisbon spent years studying this era of the country's history. In September of 2018, they made quite a breakthrough in the tiny town of Cascais. Aside from its sunny and sandy beaches, this town is also a popular spot for boaters due to its spacious marina located right in one of the town's most popular areas. It also has a rich history. Its marina may be filled with yachts and personal sailboats now, but it used to welcome a very different kind of fleet. The area, which is currently flooded with tourists and upper-class Portuguese travelers, was once filled with adventurers. During the 16th century, Cascais was a crucial spot for the Portuguese trade ships. The Tagus is the main river flowing through Portugal, so large ships traveled it to reach the ocean. Luís Mendes, Portugal's Minister of Culture, said the Tagus River was considered a hot spot for trade in the era of wooden ships, but that didn't mean it was safe. The river is filled with large rocks, making it a dangerous route. And when archaeologists made an astounding discovery just off the coast in September of 2018, Mendes said it proved how crucial the Tagus was to the history of Portugal. The archaeologist project director and maritime expert agreed with Mendes. From a heritage perspective, George Freire said, "This is the discovery of the decade. So, what did they find?" Freire and his crew found a 400-year-old shipwreck. "We found the ship using a geophysical survey and divers," he said, and spent 4 days working on the site, and the wreck was special. It was remarkably well preserved, and so were some of the items found on the ship. Among several little treasures was a fragment of Chinese pottery from the Wan Li period of the Ming Dynasty, which is incredibly helpful in dating the ship. Zhu Yijin was a Wan Li emperor, the 14th emperor of the Ming Dynasty. He reigned for 48 years starting in 1572, which meant this ship landed at the bottom of the river around that time, at the end of the 16th century or the start of the 17th. That particular period was the height of the spice trade for Portugal, so it came as no surprise when archaeologists also discovered black pepper, a commodity so valuable at the time that it was often used as collateral or even currency. However, this wasn't the only alternative currency on board. Sadly, the wreck also contained several cowrie shells from a type of sea snail. Cowrie shells come with a dark past, as they were often used as a currency in the slave trade in many parts of Africa. What that tells us is the ship visited several continents, all in one trip, but not without risk. The last and largest items found in the river were several bronze cannons. A ship carrying such valuable goods was at risk for piracy and other looters, so the cannons served as protection against unfriendly ships, assuring the goods would make it back to Portugal safely. The cannons were engraved with Portugal's coat of arms, which is still found on the Portuguese flag. This cemented the discovery as an important cultural relic for the coastal nation, and that was how the wreck was treated. "This is one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the century," said Cascais Mayor Carlos Carreras. "The recognition from the scientific community that this is a discovery of the decade, the century, in terms of marine archaeology, is for us a great satisfaction." While skilled archaeological divers quickly removed parts of the wreckage that were at risk, the rest of the wreckage will remain in the river indefinitely for experts to explore. This unnamed trade ship is not the first wreckage to be found in the Tagus River. Nearly a century older, another ship sank in 1606 when it was trying to seek safer anchorage in the Tagus River during a windstorm. Unfortunately for those on board, it didn't end well. It struck a submerged rock and went down close to the shore. Lost in that wreck was a massive amount of black pepper, which completely covered the river. To the delight of the people who lived in the river, eagerly scavenged what they could. This ship, which researchers discovered, was called the Nossa Senhora dos Matres, which first detected in 1993 and excavated between 1996 and 2001. If a ship in such a broken state could be identified, there was a great chance this new ship could be identified too. The recent finding of the Cascais shipwreck is attracting even more tourism, so the government has displayed some of the divers' photos at the Santo Antonio Fort in São João do Estoril. Who wouldn't be curious about such a grand historical find? Neolithic people made fake islands more than 5,600 years ago. Hundreds of tiny islands around Scotland didn't arise naturally. They're fakes that were constructed out of boulders, clay, and timbers by Neolithic people about 5,600 years ago, a new study finds. Researchers have known about these artificial islands, known as crannogs, for decades. But many archaeologists thought that crannogs were made more recently, in the Iron Age about 2,800 years ago. The new finding not only shows that these crannogs are much older than previously thought, but also they were likely very special locations for Neolithic people, according to nearby pottery fragments found by modern divers, the researchers wrote in a study. Initially, many researchers thought that Scotland's crannogs were built around 800 BC and reused until post-medieval times in AD 1700. But in the 1980s, hints began to emerge that some of these islands were made much earlier. In addition, in 2012, Chris Murray, a former Royal Navy diver, found well-preserved Neolithic pots on the lake floor near some of these islands, and he alerted a local museum about the discovery. To investigate, two UK archaeologists, Duncan Garrow from the University of Reading and Fraser Stewart from the University of Southampton, teamed up in 2016 and 2017 to take a comprehensive look at several crannogs in the Outer Hebrides, an artificial island hotspot off the coast of northern Scotland. In particular, they looked at islets in three lakes, Loch Arnish, Loch Borgastall, and Loch Longabat. According to radiocarbon dating, 4 of the crannogs were created between 3640 BC and 3360 BC. The researchers found other evidence, including ground and underwater surveys, paleoenvironmental coring, and excavation, supported the idea that these particular islets dated to the Neolithic. Archaeologists have yet to find any Neolithic structures on the islands, and they said more excavations were needed. But divers found dozens of Neolithic pottery fragments, some of them burnt, around the islets in Borgastall and Longabat, the researchers said. These pots were likely dropped into the water intentionally, possibly for ritual, the researchers said. Each of the islets is fairly small, measuring approximately 33 feet, or 10 meters across. One islet in Loch Borgastall even had a stone causeway connecting it to the mainland. And, though it undoubtedly looked like a lot of work to make these crannogs, these structures were clearly important to these ancient people, as there are 570 known in Scotland alone. So far, just 10% of the crannogs in Scotland have been radiocarbon dated, meaning that there may be more ancient crannogs than these newfound Neolithic ones, the researchers said. The study was published online June 12th in the journal Antiquity.
Massive structure found buried in the sands of Petra. Satellite imagery and drones have revealed an enormous man-made stone structure hiding in plain sight at the ancient city of Petra. Ever since Swiss explorer Johann Burckhardt became the first Westerner to rediscover the ruins of Petra in 1812, archaeologists have flocked to the ancient desert city with trowels and spades in hand. Although archaeologists have documented thousands of carved and constructed monuments at the UNESCO World Heritage Site, a pair of researchers has proven that Petra has yet to reveal all of her secrets. In a newly published study in the latest issue of the Bulletin of American Schools of Oriental Research, University of Alabama at Birmingham archaeologist Sarah Parkak and Christopher Tuttle, executive director of the Council of American Overseas Research Centers, report that they have found a massive stone monument hiding in plain sight at Petra. For 2 centuries, tourists and archaeologists alike had no idea what was hidden right underneath their feet in the sands of the ancient capital city of the Nabatean Kingdom, which was abandoned in the 7th century. All the discovery took was a change of perspective, some high-tech tools, and the eagle eye of Parcak, an archaeologist nicknamed the Indiana Jones from space. Parcak is a self-described space archaeologist who studies satellite imagery and uses complex algorithms to detect subtle changes in vegetation that signal man-made objects hidden from view on the ground. She has used satellite images to help locate 17 potential pyramids in Egypt, 1,000 lost tombs, and 3,100 forgotten settlements. In order to test whether discoveries at well-known and well-surveyed archaeological sites around the world could be possible with a similar high-tech study, Parcak began to analyze high-resolution satellite imagery of Petra from Google Earth and the WorldView 1 and WorldView 2 satellites. As Parcak studied a plateau less than a mile south of the city center of Petra, a huge rectangular outline came into focus. She passed her observations along to Tuttle in Petra, and he followed up with 4 ground surveys to take photographs, make detailed observations, and collect measurements and GPS points. In addition, Tuttle launched a drone over the site to take aerial photographs, which were laid over the satellite images. What the archaeologists had discovered was a massive 30,000 square foot platform, twice as big as an Olympic swimming pool, supported by substantial terrace walls and topped by a smaller 28-foot by 28-foot platform, which was paved with flagstones and originally lined with sandstone drum columns on one side and a vast staircase on the other. Pottery found near the structure suggests that it could have been built as early as 2,150 years ago, at a time when Petra was flourishing. The discovery came as a surprise to Parcak. "We thought that maybe we'd find some small stone structures or roads," she told NPR, "but we didn't think at all that we would find anything large just because Petra is a World Heritage Site and it's been worked on intensively for nearly 200 years. The archaeologists say the structure is unique in terms of its size, shape, location, and orientation. This monumental platform has no parallels at Petra or in its hinterlands at present," Parcak and Tuttle wrote in the article. The amount of effort to construct the site was massive, yet the focal building itself is quite small. The platform is located relatively close to the ancient city center, but in a spot where easy access from the city center is not readily apparent. The researchers believe the platform may have had a ceremonial purpose, and the east-west alignment of the smaller structure may have permitted its conversion to a Christian chapel during the Byzantine period. "We know it's large, it's significant, it's important. It probably would have had some kind of a public function," Parcak told NPR. "Could it be used for religious purposes? Was it some sort of public administrative structure? I wish I knew." A possible excavation in the coming years might help to solve the mystery. This study, combining high-tech imagery analysis and a non-collection pedestrian survey, was the first ever undertaken at Petra, and Parcak told the Boston Globe that the discovery demonstrates the need for archaeologists to employ more drones and satellite imagery to uncover ancient relics. "Even at very large and very well-known World Heritage Sites, we've taken a lot for granted in terms of what's there," she said. "It's important to use these new technologies to really allow us to look at them with a fresh pair of eyes." We already knew Scotland's finest and best preserved medieval tunnel lies buried beneath Paisley town centre. But the centuries-old mystery of where it ended had never been solved until now. A team of experts spent the summer excavating at Paisley's Abbey Drain and painstakingly uncovered a well-preserved 14th century stone archway, marking the exact point the drain and its contents once flowed into the River Cart. They found the tunnel, believed to be around 100 meters long, ends around 3 meters from the banks of the present-day river, which would have been wider and shallower at the time the drain was built. And while the find is now being covered up again, the discovery could help lead to a more permanent visitor attraction opening up access to the drain in the future. The 8-week Abbey Drain Big Dig was coordinated by Renfrewshire Council and led by Guard Archaeology Limited, funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund, Historic Environment Scotland, and Renfrewshire Local History Forum. More than 6,500 people visited the dig over the 8 weeks, which also saw a strong community element, with volunteers from the local history forum taking part, and a series of events and seminars for residents and visitors. Dig leader Bob Will of Guard Archaeology has described the condition of what the team found as incredible. He said, "We found more than I was expecting, and it is really exciting. We found the end of the drain and what was the boundary wall of the monastery. The river was wider and shallower in those days, much more than in the last couple of 100 years, as the walls now surrounding it are artificial. The main parts of the drain date back to the mid-14th century and are incredibly well preserved. It goes at least as far as the road in front of Renfrewshire House. Often, these types of drains are in rural areas, not urban ones, where there will have been pressure on the land above it. But considering the amount of buildings on that site over the centuries, the condition of the drain is quite incredible. The Abbey Drain has lain hidden for centuries, until it was unexpectedly rediscovered in the 19th century, and in recent years, it has been periodically opened up for visitors. There will be an opportunity for the public to put their names forward for a ballot to go inside it during this year's Doors Open Day in September. And Bob believes the finds of the past few weeks could help the development of a more permanent attraction, opening up a greater degree of public access to the drain. He said, "What we have uncovered has helped us to see what could be done with any future excavation. We now know much more about the medieval ground levels and have a good idea of where some of the monastery buildings were. Ideally, there would be more permanent access to the drain at some point in the future, and what we've uncovered here makes that much more feasible." Renfrewshire Council leader Ian Nicholson added, "Paisley is already on the map as a key visitor destination within Scotland, and we are already delivering on ambitious plans to use our unique heritage to drive new footfall to the town centre. We would be keen to explore any opportunities to build on that by opening up more permanent access to the Abbey Drain at some point in the future. And the findings of the Big Dig mean we now know more than ever about this incredible feature beneath the town centre." The Big Dig was a really great community project, which has created a lot of interest in Paisley Town Centre and its history over the past couple of months. We would like to thank our funders for helping make it happen, and all who have been involved in the projects, particularly the local volunteers who came out in all weathers to take part.